They said humanity had 48 hours to surrender or face extinction. Every species in the galaxy agreed. Every prophet, every war council, every ancient star chart pointed to the same conclusion. We were finished. What they didn't know was that we'd been ready for this moment for 30 years. Let's go. And hey, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think humans should have done. Now, let's move forward into this fight together. Commander James Harlow had not slept in 61 hours. That wasn't unusual for a man in his position. As the senior fleet intelligence officer aboard the UES Relentless, Harlow had built a career out of functioning in the space between exhaustion and clarity. That thin edge where the brain strips away everything unnecessary and operates on pure signal. He was 44 years old, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped brown hair that had started going silver at the temples 2 deployments ago. His face was the kind that had been handsome once and was now just hard. Not cruel, just worn down to something useful. He stood at the wide observation port on Deck 4, watching the stars, holding a cooling cup of coffee he hadn't touched in 20 minutes. Behind him, the Relentless hummed with quiet, controlled urgency. Officers moved through corridors with purpose. Data streams scrolled across every workstation. Outside, the rest of 7th Fleet held formation, 14 warships arrayed in a loose crescent around the edge of the Calder Corridor, the most strategically critical choke point between human space and the Keth Dominion's outer territories. The Keth had not expected humans to know about the Calder Corridor. That had been their first mistake. 3 weeks ago, the Galactic Compact, a 57-species governing body that humanity had applied to join 7 times and been rejected 7 times, issued what they called the Harlow Ultimatum. Named mockingly after him, James Harlow had stood before the Compact's Grand Assembly on Vareth Station and delivered humanity's position in clear, measured, legally precise terms. Cease the proxy resource raids on human colonial systems. Return the 412 civilian workers taken from the Brennan mining stations, and agree to binding arbitration within 30 standard days, or humanity would consider itself in a state of war. The assembly had laughed. Not metaphorically. Several species communicated amusement through physical sound. The Keth with a low rattling hum. The Vresi with rapid bioluminescent flickers across their membrane skin. The Dorath with a synchronized clicking of their secondary jaw structures. And they had all done it. At once. In front of a broadcast that reached every inhabited system in the known galaxy. A Keth senator, broad-scaled, ancient, had leaned into the amplification relay and said, in translation, "Humanity is a child species threatening a storm. Let them speak. They will tire of speaking. They always do."
Thank you.
Harlow had watched that clip 47 times. Not out of anger, out of study. He needed to understand the arrogance completely. Not just what they said, but why they believed it. Because understanding the enemy's confidence was the first step toward dismantling it. The 30 days had passed. Humanity had not tired of speaking. Humanity had spent those 30 days doing something far more dangerous than speaking.
Just checking your vitals now.
Harlow turned from the observation port
stable?
and walked back to the intelligence center. Lieutenant Cole Weathers, 26, sharp-eyed and perpetually running on 2 energy drinks and determination, looked up from his workstation. "Asset confirmation from the Brennan survivors, sir. 409 confirmed alive. 3 confirmed dead in transit. Locations are locked." Harlow nodded once. "And the Compact's response to our final notification?" Weathers hesitated. That hesitation told Harlow everything, but he waited for the words anyway. "They formally rejected it, sir. The Compact's official statement says, and I'm quoting, 'The United Earth Command's continued posturing is noted and dismissed. Humanity's military capacity does not warrant further diplomatic engagement.'" The room was very quiet. Harlow set down his cold coffee. "Get me Admiral Chen." Somewhere in the corridor outside, a junior officer was whistling softly. Something old, something American, a tune Harlow couldn't quite place. It sounded almost cheerful. That sound would be the last quiet thing James Harlow heard for a long, long time. Because somewhere in the compact's great assembly hall, the delegates were still laughing. They had no idea what they'd just started. The thing about fleet intelligence work, the thing that outsiders never understood, was that the most important battles happened before a single weapon was fired. Harlow understood this at a cellular level. He had spent 11 years building the intelligence architecture that now sat beneath the surface of this entire operation, like the skeleton of something enormous, invisible, structural, load-bearing. When the compact's delegates laughed at his ultimatum, they were laughing at the visible fraction. They had no way of knowing what was underneath. Admiral Linda Chen appeared on the secure channel from the command ship UES Foundation. She was 60 years old, precise, and had the kind of calm that came not from lack of feeling, but from absolute mastery of feeling. She looked at Harlow the way chess players look at a board mid-game. "They rejected the final notification," she said. "It wasn't a question." Formally, broadcast-wide, Harlow pulled up the confirmation data. They wanted the galaxy to see them do it. Chen was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Then we'll make sure the galaxy sees what comes next. Execute Protocol Harrow. All phases simultaneous." Harlow had written Protocol Harrow. He knew every line of it. He gave the order anyway, with the same steady voice he'd have used to order lunch. Within the next 4 minutes, 7 things happened simultaneously across 14 star systems. The first thing, 7th Fleet activated its full combat configuration. The 14 ships of the Crescent Formation shifted formation. Quiet, precise, no communications burst that could be detected, into the layered assault pattern Harlow had designated as Shepherd. It was a formation designed specifically for the Calder Corridor's geography. Tight, mutually reinforcing fields of fire, with 2 fast-strike frigates positioned for flanking at the rear edge of the approach lane. The Keth had never seen this formation before. They hadn't had reason to study human naval geometry, because they'd never considered human naval geometry worth studying. That was their second mistake. The second thing, 3 special operations teams, 12 operators each, initiated simultaneous insertion toward the Brennan Station Cluster, now confirmed as a Keth-controlled detention installation. Ground team lead was Major Ryan Stafford, who had the particular gift of making violent entry look almost administrative. The third thing, human diplomatic vessels at 7 compact member stations formally filed war declarations, stamped, dated, witnessed, legally unimpeachable, and then immediately broadcast them on every public frequency available. Not aggressive, not theatrical, just documented. Humanity had warned them. The record would exist forever. The 4th through 7th things were classified. Harlow knew what they were. He didn't discuss them on open channels. What happened next, Harlow had not predicted precisely, though he had planned for it. An hour after Protocol Harrow began, his intelligence deck flagged an incoming transmission, not from the compact, from a Vresi diplomatic vessel that had been shadowing 7th Fleet's position at the edge of sensor range for the past 6 hours. The Vresi were small, roughly human-sized but narrow, built like something evolved for tight spaces, with large light-sensitive eyes that gave them almost 360 degrees of peripheral vision, and bioluminescent patterns that ran along their shoulders and the sides of their necks, shifting color with emotional state. Their skin was pale and slightly translucent. When they were calm, the bioluminescence was a deep, slow blue. When alarmed, it shifted through greens and yellows toward white. The Vresi diplomat who appeared on Harlow's channel was very alarmed. Her bioluminescence was cycling rapidly between yellow and white. Her name was Thessaly Rowe. She was the Vressi Compact's junior observer, assigned to track human military activity, a position that her own government had considered a minor posting, a career dead end. Harlow had known she was there. He had, in fact, been counting on her being there. "Commander Harlow," she said. Her translated voice was precise and slightly clipped. The Vressi tended toward very literal speech with almost no social padding. "I am observing your fleet's shift to combat posture. This is a serious development." "Yes," Harlow said, "it is. My transmission to the Compact Council will take 4 hours to arrive and receive response." Calculating the implications of that delay, the yellow in her bioluminescence deepened. "You intended for me to be here." "I intended for someone to be here," Harlow said. "Someone who would report accurately. Someone whose government would benefit from having an unfiltered account." Thessaly Rowe's large eyes regarded him through the feed. They were pale amber, almost gold, and they moved with a precision that suggested she was tracking multiple things at once. Him, his expression, the data feeds visible on the walls behind him, the subtle movements of his crew. "You are going to fight them," she said. "You actually intend to fight the Compact." "We intend to fight the Keth Dominion," Harlow said carefully, "who violated human colonial territory, killed human workers, and took 412 human civilians as forced labor. The Compact had 30 days to provide remedy. The Compact declined. The Compact believed you were bluffing." "I know." Harlow's voice carried no satisfaction. None. "That's why I needed a witness." Thessaly Rowe's bioluminescence stopped cycling. It went very still, a deep, complex blue-green. The color, Harlow had learned from his research, that Vressi displayed when processing something that had fundamentally shifted their understanding of a situation. She said, "What are you about to do?" Harlow looked at the tactical display. 14 ships, rehearsed for 3 years, intelligence architecture 11 years in the making. 409 living civilians waiting for rescue on the other side of the Calder corridor. "Something the galaxy will remember," he said quietly. And then every piece of Protocol Harrow triggered at once, and the stars between the fleet and the corridor lit up. What the Keth expected was noise. That was the pattern of every lesser species they had suppressed over 4 centuries of Dominion expansion. Noise, then fear, then negotiation, then capitulation. It was a reliable cycle. The Keth were not cruel by nature, at least not in their own estimation. They were simply efficient. Resource acquisition required territorial control. Territorial control required demonstrated force. Lesser species made noise. The Dominion waited. The noise stopped. They had been waiting for the noise to stop. Instead, Commander James Harlow hit them with silence. 7th Fleet did not broadcast on any frequency as it moved into the Calder corridor. No war cries, no ultimatums, no final warnings. That had all been done already, properly, on the record. What entered the Calder corridor was organized, professional, and quiet. And the Keth patrol group, stationed at the near end of the choke point, had approximately 90 seconds of sensor contact before the ambush fully materialized around them. The Calder corridor was, geometrically, a nightmare for defenders. It was a long, relatively narrow lane between 2 dense debris fields, remnants of a planetary collision that had happened roughly 8,000 years ago. The debris fields weren't solid, but they were dense enough to make flanking maneuvers slow and dangerous. Conventional tactical doctrine said to station a strong force at one end and force any attacker to charge straight in. Human tactical doctrine, which Harlow had spent 7 months developing specifically for this geography, said, "Don't go through the front door." 2 months prior, 3 human stealth probes, each smaller than a shipping container, running on minimal power signatures, had mapped 17 viable microlanes through the debris fields on the corridor's flanks. Too small for capital ships, tight enough for frigates, if you were willing to accept the risk of debris collision. The probability of hull damage was 17%. Major Ryan Stafford, who commanded both the ground insertion teams and had worked with Harlow on the fleet element planning, had said, when he saw that number, 17% is the galaxy telling us to move faster. The two fast-strike frigates, UES Cutler and UES Aldridge, went through the microlanes at full military thrust. Debris rattled against their hulls. Minor impacts, paint scratches. The Aldridge took a glancing hit on her port sensor array and lost 15% resolution on that quadrant. They emerged from the debris fields behind the Keth patrol group 62 seconds before the main 7th Fleet element hit the patrol from the front. The patrol group, 3 Keth corvettes and a cruiser, had time to identify the threat, attempt to reform, and fired 2 salvos before it was over. Not over in the sense of annihilation. Harlow had not ordered annihilation. He had ordered targeted disabling, drives and weapons, because the rescue operation needed clear space, not new debris fields, and because 409 human beings were somewhere behind the patrol group, and Harlow was not going to risk them with sloppy gunfighting. The cruiser lost all drive capability inside 90 seconds. The 3 corvettes disengaged as soon as their formation collapsed, running protocol, not cowardice, and Harlow let them go. He watched them go. He noted the direction. They were running toward Keth Command. Good. He wanted them to run toward Keth Command. He wanted the report they were going to deliver. "Corridor is clear," Lieutenant Weathers reported, his voice tight with the particular tension of a young man trying very hard to sound as calm as his commander. "Rescue teams have visual on Brennan Station Cluster. Major Stafford is beginning insertion." Harlow turned to where Thessaly Rowe's feed was still active. She had been watching the entire engagement in silence, her bioluminescence cycling through colors he had no reference chart for. Her large amber eyes were wide. "That was," she said slowly, "not what they expected." "No," Harlow said, "it wasn't. You planned this, specifically. The geometry, the timing, the stealth probes, you've been building this for years," Harlow said. "Yes." Thessaly Rowe was quiet for a moment. The bioluminescence along her shoulders settled into something deep and shifting, like deep water. "The compact was told your military capacity was limited, defensive, contained." Harlow looked at her steadily. "Who told them that?" She stopped. The bioluminescence flickered, once sharp white, and then went very still. "Someone gave the compact bad intelligence," Harlow said, not accusing, simply stating. "Someone wanted them to believe humanity wouldn't or couldn't respond to the Keth's actions. Someone wanted this war to happen." He let that land. "Find out who. When you file your report, Thessaly Rowe, find out who." Before she could respond, Weathers' voice cut through the channel, and the controlled tension in it had become something else entirely. "Sir, Stafford's team is on the ground at Brennan Station. They have visual on the civilian detainees." A pause. A hard swallow. "Sir, there's something else. The station's internal logs. Stafford's team pulled them on entry. The Keth weren't just holding them for labor." Another pause, shorter and heavier. "Sir, the logs go back further than 30 days. Some of these people have been here for 2 years." The temperature in the intelligence center seemed to drop. Harlow said nothing for a full 4 seconds. Then, "Get me those logs, full copy. Encrypted and triple redundant." His voice was absolutely level. Not cold. It was something that had moved past cold into something harder and more permanent. "The compact is going to see every page." In her vessel, Thessaly Rowe's bioluminescence had gone completely white. And somewhere deeper in Keth territory, something was moving. something large, something the patrol's survivors had clearly called for. And the sensors were just beginning to resolve its shape. The shape on the sensors resolved into a Keth battle carrier. Not a standard battle carrier. The UES Relentless's intelligence suite, which Harlow had spent considerable personal political capital upgrading 4 years ago, a fact that certain admirals had questioned at the time, identified the vessel as a Sovereignty-class command ship. There were 7 of them in the entire Keth Dominion fleet. They were reserved for direct engagements of civilizational significance. The Keth were not sending a punitive force. They were sending a statement. Harlow looked at the sensor data for exactly as long as it took him to understand it, and then he turned to Weathers. "Patch me through to Stafford. Now." Stafford's voice came back rough and immediate. The background audio a controlled chaos of movement and personnel. The particular acoustic signature of a hostage rescue in progress. "Harlow, I've got your people. 403 ambulatory, 6 non-ambulatory but stable. Extraction is, we're about 12 minutes behind schedule. There's a secondary holding bay we didn't have on the original schematic." "You have 10 minutes, Ryan." "Understood." No argument. That was why Harlow liked working with Stafford. "What's in the secondary bay?" A pause. Movement sounds. Then Stafford's voice, lower. "Civilians, sir. Not ours. Vresi. About 60 of them. They've been here a long time." Harlow closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. He opened them. "You're taking them too." "Already loading them, sir." "Figured you'd say that." "Good man. 10 minutes. He cut the channel and turned back to the tactical display. The Sovereignty-class carrier was moving at a speed that suggested confidence. It was flanked by 8 destroyers and what appeared to be a screening element of fast interceptors. This was, by any traditional military calculus, an overwhelming response to the force currently in the Calder corridor. Traditional military calculus. Harlow pressed a secondary channel. "Admiral Chen." "I see it," she said immediately. "Phase 2. Confirmed. Phase 2 is active. You have what you need at the corridor?" "I need 12 minutes. You have 8. Make it work." The channel closed. Harlow looked at Weathers. "Light up the resonance buoys. All of them." Weathers looked up sharply. "Sir, that'll show them exactly where." "That's the point, Lieutenant. Light them up." They were a navigational system, specifically a 3-dimensional array of signal markers that Harlow's teams had quietly positioned throughout the Calder corridor's interior over the past 4 weeks, ostensibly as part of a survey operation that no one in the compact had paid attention to, because no one in the compact paid attention to human survey operations. When activated simultaneously, they created a navigational picture of the corridor's interior that was, quite literally, perfect. Every debris cluster mapped, every lane identified, every gravitational eddy documented. Any ship with a standard navigation system could fly the corridor at maximum military thrust, using the buoy array as a guide. The Keth battle carrier would see that array activate and know exactly what it meant. The humans knew this corridor better than they did. That knowledge would create exactly 4 seconds of hesitation in the Keth commander's decision cycle. 4 seconds was a very long time when you had also, simultaneously, activated the second layer of the trap. "Admiral Chen's element is jumping in," Weathers announced, and his voice cracked slightly on the last word, because the tactical display had just changed in a way that would have seemed impossible to anyone who hadn't known about Phase 2. Admiral Chen's element was not 14 ships, it was 41. The Second Fleet, built quietly, commissioned quietly, positioned quietly in a staging area 3 jump points away, entered the Calder corridor from the far end, simultaneously as 7 Fleet held the near end. 41 ships, including 3 human fleet carriers and a pair of heavy battle cruisers that had never been publicly reported. The Keth Sovereignty class found itself in an envelope. The silence on all frequencies was remarkable. Harlow watched the tactical display and counted seconds. At second 9, the Keth battle carrier began emergency deceleration. "Stafford," Harlow said. "Last load coming in now, sir. 3 minutes. You have 2. You keep changing the number." "Ryan." "Moving, sir." Thessaly Rowe had not spoken since the logs. Her feed was still open. Her bioluminescence was a color Harlow had no name for. Something between grief and recognition. She had been reading the logs he'd sent her. All of them. The full documentation of the Keth's activities at Brennan Station. 60 Vressi nationals she had not known were missing. "Commander Harlow," she said quietly. "Not now, Thessaly Rowe. I need to say this now." Her voice was very even. The bioluminescence settled. The intelligence that the compact received, the intelligence that said humanity would not respond, could not respond. "I know who provided it. I've known for several hours. I didn't say anything because I was—" She paused. "I was afraid of what it meant." Harlow looked at her. "Who?" "The Dorath Confederation," she said. 3 of their senior delegates on the Compact Intelligence Subcommittee. They've been supplying the Keth with assessments of human military capability for 2 years. They wanted humanity and the Keth in a war. The Dorath have territorial interests in the buffer systems between your space and the Dominions. The Intelligence Center was very quiet. Harlow said, "Is this documented?" "I have the intercept records." She lifted one narrow hand and something transferred through the channel. "I pulled them before I called you. I'm sorry it took me this long." Harlow looked at the data, then at Thessaly Rowe's face. The bioluminescence was a clear, steady blue now, the deepest blue he'd seen from her. "Committed. You just became the most important witness in this war," he said. And then every alarm on the Relentless lit up simultaneously, and Weathers was on his feet, shouting something about the Keth carrier's weapons array coming online. And Stafford's voice was in Harlow's earpiece saying, "Last personnel are aboard, sir. We are clear. We are clear." And Harlow had perhaps 3 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether the next move was war or resolution. Harlow made the decision in 2 seconds. "All fleet elements, hold fire. I say again, hold fire." His voice went out on every command channel simultaneously. "Navigation, bring the Relentless forward. Not toward the carrier, toward the midpoint. Weathers, open a direct channel to the Keth vessel, all frequencies, and flag it for compact broadcast relay. I want every system that can receive this transmission to receive it." Weathers looked at him like he'd suggested stepping outside without a pressure suit. "Sir, do it." The channel opened. The Keth Sovereignty-class carrier loomed on the tactical display. Its weapons array still charged, its escorts in a loose holding pattern, the entire formation caught between 2 human fleets, and very clearly, very precisely, aware of its situation. He thought, briefly, about the briefing room on Verath Station, where he had delivered humanity's ultimatum and been laughed at. He thought about the log entries from Brennan Station. He thought about 409 people who were right now on rescue ships, breathing recycled human air for the first time in 2 years. He spoke. "This is Commander James Harlow, United Earth Command, 7th Fleet Intelligence, addressing the commanding officer of the Keth vessel currently in the Cauldre Corridor. I want to be very precise with my words, because this is being recorded and broadcast, and will become part of the permanent record." He paused, measured. "You are currently enclosed by 7th Fleet from the near position, and by Admiral Chen's element from the far position. You are outgunned and outpositioned. I am not saying this to threaten you. I am saying it because I want you to understand that what I say next is not a bluff and is not a negotiation tactic." He let a beat pass. "Humanity does not want to destroy your ship. I want your crew to go home. I want this to stop here, at this point, with no further loss of life." His voice remained completely level. "We have recovered our civilians from Brennan Station. We have their records. We know the full scope of what happened. We also have evidence, which will be presented to the full Compact Assembly within the next 24 hours, of third-party manipulation that brought us to this point." He didn't name the Dorath yet. The naming would come at the Compact. It would land harder there. "Stand down your weapons array. Withdraw your escort elements. Transmit your formal acknowledgement of United Earth Command's jurisdiction over the Brennan system and all associated colonial infrastructure. Do this, and your crew goes home." Silence on the channel. 41 seconds of silence. Then, the Keth carrier's weapons array powered down. The escorts pulled back to an observation distance. And a voice came through, translated through the Keth communication protocol, low, with that characteristic rattling resonance, but stripped of arrogance for possibly the first time in the 4 centuries of the Keth Dominion's history. "United Earth Command, your terms are received." The intelligence center did not erupt in cheers. That wasn't who these people were. What happened was quieter and more human. Weathers sat down slowly in his chair and pressed his knuckles against his mouth. 2 officers in the back exchanged a single tight nod. Harlow heard, somewhere in the corridor outside, the same junior officer whistling that tune again. And this time, he recognized it. American Pie. Ancient song. His grandmother had known every word. But it wasn't over. Not by a long way. Because the Compact was still out there. 57 species and their politics and their centuries of assumption about humanity's place in the galaxy. And somewhere in those 57 species, 3 Dorath delegates were now realizing with dawning horror that the weapon they had carefully aimed at 2 adversaries had just been turned around. Harlow spoke again, still on the open channel, still broadcasting. "For those listening beyond the Calder corridor, we will be transmitting full documentation of Brennan Station's records, the Keth Dominion's activities, and evidence of third-party intelligence manipulation to the Compact Assembly within 24 standard hours. We will be requesting an emergency session." A pause. Humanity gave fair warning. The record shows it. "We are prepared to make peace from a position of strength, and we are prepared to stand before any lawful tribunal to account for our actions. We ask the same of everyone else." He reached out and ended the broadcast. Then he looked at Thessaly Rowe. She was glowing a color he had never seen before. Something warm. Something that shifted between gold and a clear pale green. She was looking at him with those wide amber eyes, and her expression was the expression of someone who had believed they understood a species completely, and had just discovered they had understood nothing at all. "You had them," she said quietly. "You had the position, the firepower, the justification. You could have destroyed that carrier and taken the corridor and held it for a century." "Yes," Harlow said. "Why didn't you?" "Because we want to live in this galaxy," Harlow said, "not rule it. Live in it. There's a difference." Thessaly Rowe was quiet for a long moment. Then her bioluminescence shifted one final time, to the deepest, steadiest blue Harlow had ever seen from her. And somewhere deeper in compact space, 3 Dorath delegates were making very poor decisions about how quickly they could reach a ship with no tracking beacon. But James Harlow already had their names. He already had their files, and they were not nearly as fast as they thought they were. The Compact Emergency Session convened 11 days later on Verat Station. Not in the same chamber where the delegates had left. That chamber was under review. The Compact's internal oversight body had already begun an inquiry into its own procedures, after the Brennan Station documentation reached every public data network in the known galaxy simultaneously. Harlow had arranged that. Not as a weapon, as a record. The galaxy had a right to know what had been done in its name, by its governing body, or at minimum, by people operating within it. The new chamber was larger. More species had requested observer status than the original venue could accommodate. Harlow sat at the human delegation's table with his hands folded in front of him, wearing his dress uniform for the first time in 3 years, and watched the chamber fill with beings from 57 civilizations who were, for the first time in the recorded history of their interaction with humanity, being very quiet when humans entered a room. Admiral Chen sat beside him. She hadn't said much on the way here. She'd looked at him once on the transit ship, with the expression of a person who had gambled on someone and found the gamble worth every unit they'd put in. The evidence had been worse than even Harlow had expected. The Brennan Station records showed not one, but 3 separate Keth detention operations, spanning multiple human colonial systems, running for between 18 months and 3 years. The total number of human civilians held was not 412. It was 1,106. The rescue operations, run simultaneously with the Calder Corridor engagement, by 3 other special operations elements that Harlow had pre-positioned 6 weeks prior, had recovered 988 alive. The numbers were in every transmission now. Nobody was laughing. The Dorath delegates, 2 of the 3 had been apprehended before they cleared compact space. The third had turned himself in after 48 hours, which Harlow had honestly not expected, had been remanded to compact judicial custody pending formal tribunal proceedings. The intercept records Thessaly Rowe had provided, combined with the intelligence files that human analysts had been quietly assembling for 14 months, built a case that was essentially airtight. The Dorath Confederation had deliberately manipulated compact intelligence assessments. They had facilitated Keth expansion into human colonial territory. They had done this to weaken both humanity and the Keth, clearing a path for their own territorial interests in the buffer systems. They had played the galaxy against itself and then been surprised when the galaxy noticed. The Keth Dominion had, in the 11 days since the Calder Corridor, made a series of decisions that surprised almost everyone, except possibly Harlow, who had spent years studying the Keth and believed that their arrogance was institutional, not biological. The Dominion's ruling council had removed the senior military officials responsible for the Brennan operations. They had transmitted, through diplomatic channels, an acknowledgement of the station record's authenticity. They had not yet used the word apology. That would take time, and Harlow was a patient man. What they had done was agree to attend the session. What they had done was send, as their primary delegate, the same senior senator who had said humanity is a child species threatening a storm. And that senator, when he entered the chamber, did not look at the human delegation with contempt. He looked at them the way you look at something you have fundamentally misjudged, and are only now beginning to understand. Harlow met his gaze and held it without hostility. The session ran for 3 days. Harlow testified once for 4 hours, covering the intelligence timeline, the warning protocol, the rescue operations, and the engagement at the Calder Corridor with the same measured precision he brought to everything. He was asked twice to justify the use of military force. He answered twice by reading the text of humanity's 30-day warning into the record. On the 3rd day, the compact voted provisional recognition of human sovereignty over all colonial territories, effective immediately. A binding arbitration framework for future resource and territorial disputes. A war crimes tribunal for the Dorath delegates. A joint investigation into compact intelligence practices. And, perhaps most significantly, humanity's first formal membership in the Compact Council, pending ratification, with full voting rights. Rejected 7 times. Application 8, unanimous. After the vote in the corridor outside the chamber, because this moment happened not in front of cameras but between 2 people in a hallway, which is where real things usually happen, Thessaly Rowe found Harlow standing alone, letting the noise settle around him. Her bioluminescence was the warm gold and pale green color he'd seen when she understood what he'd done in the Calder Corridor. She had been appointed, he'd heard, as the Vresi's permanent envoy to human space. A career dead-end posting, once. Now the most watched diplomatic assignment in the compact. I filed my report, she said. I know, I read it, he replied. I told them everything, she paused, including the parts about what I observed in your decision cycle. How you had options that you declined. Why? Thessaly Row, Harlow said. You don't have to explain. I included a personal recommendation, she continued, with the particular Resi directness that he'd come to find genuinely useful in a galaxy full of people who said things sideways. That the compact security framework be restructured around human analytical methodology, not because humans are superior, because you are. She searched for the word in what seemed like genuine vocabulary difficulty, honest about the cost of things. You count every casualty before you move. You plan for the peace before the war ends. Harlow looked at her for a moment. That's a generous interpretation. It's an accurate one. Her head tilted slightly. You knew I was watching from the beginning. You brought me specifically because you needed a witness who would tell the truth, because humans knew the truth would matter. The bioluminescence shifted, slowly, deliberately, into that deep and steady blue. Commander Harlow, you warned them. We did. Every species in this galaxy was told. Her voice was very quiet and very certain. They were warned. They chose not to listen. And then humanity won, and still chose restraint. She looked at him with those wide, precise amber eyes. The galaxy will be arguing about what that means for a very long time. Harlow looked down the corridor, where his officers were moving through the crowd, where Admiral Chen was shaking hands with a Keth official in a moment that would have been unimaginable 30 days ago, where a galaxy that had laughed at a warning was now, quietly, slowly, some of them reluctantly, beginning to adjust their understanding of the species they'd dismissed as a child threatening a storm. He thought about Brennan Station. 988 people coming home. 118 who weren't. He thought about a junior officer whistling American Pie in a corridor, right before everything started. He said, they thought a warning was weakness. He straightened his jacket. Outside the tall windows of the station, the stars were visible, spread across the dark in all their indifferent, ancient abundance. The whole vast galaxy, political and complex and violent, and occasionally capable of something better. Turns out, James Harlow said, it was the most dangerous thing we ever did to them. If you made it this far, you already know what to do. Drop a comment below. Do you think Harlow made the right call in that corridor? Let's hear it. Share this with someone who needs to hear a story about patience, strategy, and not blinking first. And if you're not subscribed to HFY Endurance Tales yet, what are you waiting for? We tell the stories where humanity wins the hard way. We'll see you in the next one.